Okay, it looks like we're live. That's very exciting. All right, hey y'all, we'll give people a minute to hop on the Facebook Lives. We can share to our groups or whatever. But we can go ahead and introduce ourselves. I can start. I'm really excited with this group that we have. My name is Diana. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Tampa lead organizer for Dream Defenders. And I am really excited to be on today and to talk about some of these bills with these amazing local organizers who I'll let introduce themselves. So I'll pass it to Bernice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bernice. I am the regional director with For a Future Fund here in Hillsborough area. And I am super excited to be on with y'all tonight to talk about legislative session.
Hey there, my name is Brooke Eric, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm senior organizer with Food and Water Watch Florida. And also want to just echo the same sentiments. Super stoked to be here with you guys on the flip side of session. And I'll pass it over to Sam.
Hey all, my name is Sam Ronan from Florida for Change. I am the co-founder, lead organizer. And yeah, like everyone else, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to kind of pick through the wreckage of the storm that just hit us and figure out where we go from here.
Thanks, y'all. So for those watching live, you may have been on our earlier event where we talked about some of the upcoming bills. So tonight is going to be kind of a debrief of the Florida legislative session. So kind of how this is going to work is we are, organizers from across a wide variety of issues. So we're going to talk about how we feel about legislative session, how that went, kind of pick through the carnage. We're going to talk about some specific bills and provide updates that our organizations have been keeping people abreast of throughout the session. And then we're going to talk about kind of some of the things we learned and what we would like to leave people with as people who are working on legislation this whole session. And we're also going to take questions that anyone may have. So if you're watching on the live stream, feel free to put your comments in the comments on the live stream, share this so other people can ask their questions as well, and at the end. Bernice, I'll let you talk about what the latest legislative session is with your slide.
Yeah, for sure. So our legislative session here in Florida lasts for 60 days, and it is some of the toughest 60 days for civil rights in the state of Florida. And during this time, bills are proposed by both the House and Senate, and bills actually have to pass both houses to become law. I'm curious to hear from like the other folks that are on here. How are y'all feeling after legislative session? I know we're gonna dive into the meat of it a little bit later, but just curious to hear any kind of just temperature check on how you're feeling about it.
Well, I can say temperature check, yay that it's over and we can regroup. But this was definitely one of the toughest sessions in my years of organizing. I think we saw across the board that the Florida legislature took advantage of a worldwide pandemic to silence voices, to stop us from being able to have a fair and representative democracy, and utilized that to then pass legislation that took away even further our ability to practice our rights and to have a say in the laws that govern us in the future, so that even when there's not a pandemic, it's going to be tougher for us now. And it's just very frustrating. But I do have faith in what we can do.
Yeah, this is definitely a mixed bag. Everyone who knows me knows I love legislative session. I love policy. So I get excited for session and I stay excited through session. I always, at the end of it, feel like that was not enough time. Just going through this process every year of trying to get a hold of lawmakers because something just last minute got added to the agenda because we're trying to legislate everything in 60 days is always very stressful. And every year I'm like, that feels kind of inefficient. So, and also just really disappointed in what the legislative priorities were this year. Like, I'm just, I feel like people this last year through this pandemic, and last summer through the uprisings, which happened mostly after last legislative session, like we learned a lot of things that our society needs, and we saw a lot of gaps in like ways we could improve our communities. And people really came together to like fight for those things. And that just was not reflected in like this legislative slate. And the things that became like the big priorities were not, addressing the pandemic and public safety and healthcare and all those things. So, feeling very frustrated that like the leadership we have right now does not seem to care about what we need, and what communities have come together and say they need.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say get me started, but I feel like you guys really covered most of it. This is easily the worst led session, I think, of my lifetime, any of our lifetimes. I am describing bills to people that are out of state that don't believe me that these bills are real. Like, we still have a broken unemployment system. Speaking of things that went wrong last year, problems that we learned about that we could have addressed. And instead of doing anything about that, we passed a bill that mandates that classrooms have to have victims of communism come in if anything good about leftist politics is said. You have to balance it out now with taxpayer dollars and bring in a victim of communism to tell the kids communism is bad, government is bad. It's an actual bill that they passed, but we didn't fix unemployment. So frustration is an understatement.
For sure. Thanks y'all for sharing that. So as a reminder to people who have hopped on the live session, you can post questions that you have about the session in the comments at any point during this stream. I think now we're going to get into some of the bills. So the next slide has the first bill we're going to talk about. Oh, House Bill 1. It's me. So House Bill 1 was really like what Dream Defenders spent most of legislative session working on. So most people listening to this live stream probably have heard us talk about it. It's DeSantis's super unconstitutional censorship bill that criminalizes protesting, basically makes it a felony to protest, and infringes on the First Amendment. It's amazing how broad it is and how horrible like every little part of it is. Sometimes there's a bill where like one or two parts are bad and you can amend those out. This was not that bill. It has a preemption clause in it. So if your city government, which you elect to spend your tax dollars, chooses to have a reduction in the police budget or to reallocate part of the police budget to like a community response system or mental health counselors or social workers or something like that, any city official, any city council member, or the state attorney can appeal that to the governor and his cabinet, so literally Ron DeSantis, who can decide that, no, you cannot reduce your police budget by one cop car. You can't do a hiring freeze. You can't cut back the number of police officers. So literally preempting home rule and taking away power from your municipal government to decide how to allocate your tax dollars. It protects Confederate monuments. If you damage a monument, you can go to prison for 15 years. It creates all these new felonies. It creates like mob intimidation and aggravated rioting. And it increases penalties for other like things that are already illegal, where if you do them at a protest, you get increased punishments. If 3 people are blocking a road, you can be charged with felonies. All this really horrible stuff. And it just passed in like the most terrible way as well, where every time it was heard in committee, you had legislators talking about, the Democrats would say like, literally one said, I have 3,000 emails in my inbox about House Bill 1, and none of them are in favor. Representative Andrew Learned talked about like, he was like, I literally had to make a folder in my inbox for all of the thousands of emails that I'm getting from constituents against House Bill 1. So Floridians really made their voice heard that they didn't want this bill. And I was in Tallahassee for the only hearing that it got in the Senate, because the Senate was like we're not going to hear this bill. And then they moved it out of the 2 committee assignments to send it to the last committee. So it only went through 1 committee, appropriations. It didn't have to go through criminal justice. Like, it didn't have to go through any of those things that it should have had to go through. And it was this special session that was all day, like 8 hours. And 80 people came from all across the state, from all these different organizations. Like, every big name organization had people out there. And like 80 people spoke against the bill, like got to Tallahassee in the middle of the pandemic. And no one spoke in favor of it, you know? And one of the senators pointed that out. Like, he was like, this is House Bill 1. Like, this is the governor's priority. This is like the biggest thing we're doing this year, the #1 priority. And not even one person came out here to speak in favor of it. Like, it's not something Floridians asked for. It's not something anyone wanted. There was no, there were no sheriffs there even. Like, there wasn't, cops even being like, this is really what we want to keep our community safe. Like, no one was excited about this bill. And how can you have a bill where so many Floridians, thousands, tens of thousands of Floridians, sent emails, made phone calls, went to Tallahassee in a pandemic to publicly speak about it? Overwhelmingly, this was an unpopular bill, and you're still going to like pass it on party lines. I mean, so many amendments were introduced that would make it like a little bit less terrible. Not a single amendment passed. Like, and you would hear there'd be all this debate, when you were listening to the session, like the Democrats are like going back and forth about it, and they're being like asking questions and, trying to get clarity around things. And like, the Republicans never talked in the Senate. There was not like discussion about it. They just would vote. It'd be like all this conversation about why you should vote for the amendment, and then just, pass on party lines. So really frustrating to see, how they didn't care what constituents wanted, because constituents pretty clearly made their voices heard. And they still just voted in line with Ron DeSantis, to like give this governor his little mini Trump ego kick. That's gonna, he's trying to use to propel his career forward. So, and he boasted, Ron DeSantis boasted about how this is like the most sweeping anti-riot legislation in the country. Like, Florida's the one that did that. Like, there's not other, states we would stereotype as red states or whatever, did not do, like, we did this. Like, we did the one that is going to set the foundation that other states are probably going to follow. So very frustrating to be part of this and to just see how constituents' voices were really ignored at a time where like we had really clear asks about like what Floridians needed, like the unemployment system. So yeah, that was House Bill 1. It passed on party lines. 1 Republican flipped total. Every Democrat voted against it, and 1 Republican flipped to vote against it, and otherwise it passed on party lines. We can go to the next slide and someone else can can rant about their bill. Oh, it's me again. Okay.
I was going to say the next slide is also you.
Aren't you so excited? Aren't you so excited to hear about how this session we had more anti-LGBTQ piece of legislation filed than in like 30 years or something? So there's a lot. There was a lot of bills, good and bad, that affected the LGBT community this session. And I'm putting on my Pasco Pride hat, by the way. I'm a proud member of Pasco Pride, and we were really proud to work on some of these bills. But the one we're going to talk about tonight is SB 1028, which is the anti-trans sports bill. So it's this transphobic bill that discriminates against trans kids playing in sports. And this was such a particularly painful one because actually literally last week, Bernice and I were on a call together where we were like, hey, isn't it so great that we killed that anti-trans bill? I'm so glad that bill died. And then, you know what they did? Because you know that the rules only apply to the party that's in the minority. They took the bill that we had successfully killed and they attached it as a rider to a charter school bill and passed it in like a 24-hour window. So this bill is going to the governor's desk to be signed because, I'm not going to call names. I'm not going to say names on the live stream. But Equality Florida is doing some really great work around this. So I am going to drop a link in the comments. They have some shifts available for phone banking and text banking. to try and get the governor to veto the bill. This is really like our last chance to stop this bill because it already passed the House and Senate. So it goes to the governor's desk to be signed. And this would be the worst piece of anti-trans legislation that has passed since 1997. So if you have like 1 hour, we'll have like 1 hour somewhere. Hop on a phone bank with Equality Florida, and, you know, let's try. Let's really try to like protect trans kids. Like, it's so important for all children to have the experience of like learning how to win with grace and how to lose with pride, and like how to, you know, the team building that comes in sports. And like, this is such an important formative thing for all students to have. And this excludes trans girls specifically from being able to play sports. And repeatedly, like, Democrats asked Republicans repeatedly on the stand, is this a problem in Florida? Like, have we had a problem with this in Florida? And the Republican sponsors had to admit, no, this has not been a thing in Florida. Like, this is not a problem that we're having in Florida. But that doesn't matter when people are transphobic. Yeah, so, you know, hot mess. So I'm going to drop 2 links. There's going to be a link to the phone banking. And then there's going to be also there's just like you can send an email to Ron DeSantis, and it's super quick. That one takes like 30 seconds. So there's no excuses. We all need to send a little email to Ron DeSantis because we're very mad at him for many reasons, but specifically because he needs to veto the anti-trans bill because it's hurtful and it's transphobic and it's completely unnecessary and doesn't solve any issues. So I am going to stop talking and drop those 2 links. Everyone needs to do the email one, but also we should do the phone bank one too.
Yeah, Sam, do you want to talk about the rally that's tomorrow?
I do. We are actually going to be co-sponsoring an event tomorrow. It's going to be 6 p.m. Hillsborough County Center at 601 East Kennedy Boulevard. And we are going to have a rally to let kids play. And we are going to be encouraging Ron DeSantis to not sign this bill because he has not signed it yet. We don't feel too hopeful about that. So we're also going to be making a call to all of our elected officials, essentially calling for them to not follow through on this hateful, unnecessary bill. We've already seen a couple of sheriff's departments around Florida that are refusing to comply with HB1. So it's possible with courage. Hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. Oh, hey, also me. Cool. Oh boy, SB 90. So this one is a real doozy and not even that original because it's really just a ripoff of the Georgia bill. So SB 90 is our voter suppression bill this cycle. And what that means is, much like in Georgia, they are going to prevent people from being able to share water and food to old women that are online trying to vote and little things like that. But what goes a little bit deeper than what happened in Georgia, which is really fascinating, last cycle we had at least 5 million people that voted by mail. Voting by mail is one of the main things that we all push. I know For Our Future pushes it, Dream Defenders pushes it. We all try to push people to vote by mail because it's convenient, because it's easy, it's accessible. It means that working class families are able to vote by mail. It means that disabled folks are able to vote by mail. People in rural areas overwhelmingly tend to vote by mail. 2016, most Trump votes in rural states were actually voting by mail. It just works for absolutely everyone. But in Florida, it mostly works for Democrats. So, of course, this administration had to target it. So what's going to happen is your vote by mail request is going to be disconnected. It's discontinued. It's done. You have to reapply every single cycle. If you already had one, it's over. You have to do it again. And then you have to do it again every single cycle. So we already have such an issue of accessibility to voter literacy, and now it's going to be exponentially worse. If we manage to sign you up at one point and you don't know that this bill is passed, you just don't get a vote by mail ballot. You just don't vote. You might not know when it's time to vote. There's millions of Floridians that don't have the luxury of constant internet access and know exactly where to go and when to go and what's going on and who's on their ballot. And being able to vote by mail and get signed up 4 years in advance and have that constantly recurring is one of the most powerful tools that we have. And this bill has robbed us all of that. Not only that, because everything with these bills gets worse. I feel like we're just laying out all these terrible things, and then we have to go, but wait, there's more. And of course, there is more. One of the primary ways that vote-by-mail ballots actually get delivered, and we're talking about at least 2 million of those 5 million last cycle, is by drop-off boxes. So those can be in libraries, churches, anywhere you would go to vote. There can be drop-off boxes. Your loved ones, your friends, your family, your coworkers can drop those off for you. And like we've said, we're talking about the working poor, we're talking about disabled folks. It makes things so much more accessible for voters to be able to do that. And this bill mandates that now only proven close family can drop off your ballot. What does that mean? We're not really sure. How are they going to decide it? We're not really sure. Sometimes these boxes are mostly unattended, safe and locked down, but unattended. Who do I go to show and prove that I am close family? What does close family mean? We're not entirely sure, because the truth is the people that wrote this bill don't really care. The cruelty is the point over anything else, not the specificity. Little words that drip on the tongue as we're all ranting right now. And unfortunately, this bill is going to cost taxpayers because we're talking about moving boxes around. We're talking about logistics, and there is no plan within the legislation to pay for it. It's just going to come right out of your pocket. And that is about all I've got on SB 90. A very terrible bill that covers so much ground of cruelty.
I'll take over. These are anti-union bills, so I'm sorry that there's so much negativity in this call tonight. Like, I wish we had some happier bills to report on, but unfortunately, this is what happened during legislative session. So talking about our anti-union bills, because they were attempts to basically union bust through the Florida legislature. HB 835 and SB 1014. This is one that For Our Future works on a lot. So these bills basically were doing a couple things specifically around education unions. So they were eliminating dues deductions for education unions, and all the education unions have to have like 50% membership density or risk decertification. And they also did this thing where they wanted to have a special disclaimer in 14-point bold font saying, Florida is a right to work state and you don't have to join a union. So I'm not sure why they felt that that was necessary, but that was a part of the bill. Thankfully, this is one that did not pass. So that's the good news that I have, is that this did not pass. Similar thing for SB 78. The purpose of that was putting like an undue burden on the employer and the employee. So essentially, they were putting the employer in charge of the dues authorization process, which means like they were putting the employer, making them confirm with the employee that they authorize the deduction of dues for unions. So it's just another way to like confuse people and another way to force workers to reauthorize every time a contract is signed. A member would have to submit a reauthorization form to remain a member when they have no intention of leaving the union. So they were just doing things to disempower our unions. And fortunately, these two bills did not pass. So I guess maybe that's the good news that we have for tonight, is some of the bad bills didn't pass. And hopefully they don't come back next year.
Okay, I wish I could say that the sunshine rises on this slide, but just more bad legislation that has been passed. I do want to kind of note, though, that a lot of these bills we've been talking about do have very valid legal complaints against them. So just because we're telling you what passed doesn't mean that this is going to be the end all. Just a little light in the darkness here, that there are legal challenges that could potentially knock down some of these bills. And the environmental bills don't change any of that. So there were a slew of bad energy preemption bills that were introduced this legislative session. Background information shows that these bills were all drafted by, written, lobbied by the oil and gas industry, who, just as with all this other legislation, took advantage of their ability to really bully people, and then additionally use a lot of scare tactics against cities and localities and legislators into taking advantage of the lack of information that a lot of people have about very complex, nuanced energy issues, to then exploit and confuse. So pretty much, just so you know, like what the preemption means, it means that a city's doing something that may or may not be positive. The state comes in and says, well, now city, you have no say in this, and we're going to make all of the decisions from now on this area. So the state of Florida has completely dropped the ball when it's come to having any sort of renewable energy standards, greenhouse gas standards, a portfolio to move us into a clean energy future. Even when legislation has been introduced that would help our state to move forward and away from what is a climate emergency. I mean, we are looking at, truly, I think there was a line in a letter in the Tampa Bay Times today that said Florida's headed toward a hellish environmental apocalypse. I mean, that is really what is happening in Florida, absent any action. And the state has failed to act. And we have been lucky enough to have some great local leaders who have come in at the persuasion of their constituents, because we know nothing's done without constituent pressure, but at the behest of their constituents, and have moved to clean up their communities by moving to 100% clean renewable energy promises away from fossil fuels that are only fast tracking us into this climate disaster. So there were 11 cities around the state of Florida who had made clean energy commitments. And the thing about the clean energy commitments, it's not just, oh, we want to see solar and things are going to be so nice when we're not paying gas bills. It also has really major social impacts as well, which has been at the heart of moving forward on these commitments locally, which is access to clean and renewable energy has a gateway to entry that is not as accessible to people who come from lower income neighborhoods, who have been burdened with higher energy bills, those who are in rental housing don't have the ability to have a home with renewable energy. And so with these commitments that have been made by cities, they're stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to take care of this. We're going to make it where the entire community can move forward. We don't have to worry about taking on heavy loans in order to get our community to move forward. You don't have to be someone of privilege in order to have access to lower cost energy. It goes into transportation and having access to electric vehicles. The Tampa Bay region continually fails when it comes to air quality because of the amount of pollution that we're putting out from our vehicles. These are ways for us to move forward to have clean transportation, clean energy, to not only stop asthma from this pollution, but also to help us to address future things like sea level rise and mosquito-borne illnesses from standing water because we don't have the right infrastructure and we haven't done anything to stop everything that's going on. Anyway, I'm ranting about all of the things that have been stopped because there were cities that had moved to make Florida on a path to clean energy. The state, who hasn't acted, so it's not like they came in with a better plan, decided this year at the behest of big oil and gas that they were going to introduce bills that knocked out all of those local efforts, all of the efforts of the people, everything that had been put in place so that locals could protect their energy decisions. And at the one, well, arguably the two worst ones are the first two on here. So House Bill 919 and Senate Bill 896. So what House Bill 919 does is it pretty much voids those clean energy commitments. It says that localities cannot do anything to restrict or prohibit the type of fuel that fuels their community. And then goes even further to say not only those that restrict or prohibit, but those that also have the effect of restricting or prohibiting. So this is where it really comes into like things like affordable housing, where we could start electrifying buildings and change building codes so that we're not powering our city with this dirty high cost energy anymore. Because if you change the way that a building receives its energy, then you're restricting the type of fuel that can go into that building. So what this blanket line does at the end of the day is it locks us into a future with dirty fossil fuels and says that we can't do anything to move away from methane gas, and that unless you own your own utility, which only a few cities do, they cannot make any determination based on what's best for their community. Senate Bill 896 reminds me a lot of what happened with the transphobia bill, in that it was a bill, there was a bill that existed that was redefining renewable energy to include dirty biogas. Still a crappy bill, but got a lot worse because there was a bill that was not moving, and in the 11th hour was added on as a rider, as an amendment, which forces solar utility scale projects into neighborhoods that may not want them. So at first it looked really good, and that's how it's been packaged is, hey, we're going to increase solar by putting utility scale solar on all this agricultural farmland. Well, unfortunately, when the utilities decide where they want to go, they generally go to communities where the land is cheapest and where they feel they'll get the least resistance, which have been throughout the state of Florida, historically Black low-income neighborhoods where families had been struggling just to get land rights for a century. And then now the land that is part of the community and that could be continually transferred down through generations is being taken by these large-scale utilities, and not even to power those cities. That energy is then being sent to other areas of the state. We had an amazing fight won in Archer, Florida by survivors of Rosewood, a horrible racial disaster where just a horrible thing. And the people who have moved the community to Archer were able to fight the utility from taking the land that they lived on and turning it into large-scale solar utility scale solar. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional about it. It is wonderful, the battle that was won, and luckily there was a carve out for that community. However, how many other communities are now going to be vulnerable because of this legislation moving through? And if you spoke to the warriors who won that battle, it was not easily won, and not every community has people who have who are able to be at the forefront of fighting these battles, because a lot of times they happen in in back rooms without forward-facing knowledge, and it takes really astute citizens in order to identify that it's even happening before it's too late. So really awful bill. Then there's just some like real like BS bills like HB 839, which is an unnecessary gas station regulation bill, which is just saying cities can't ban gas stations. Guess what? No city was trying to ban a gas station. Also, just more fear mongering. And then one that I didn't get to work on personally as much, but a lot of my really wonderful colleagues did, Senate Bill 64, which has more or less mandated that effluent, also known as toilet water, is going to be put into the aquifer. So Florida's had problems with what to do with wastewater for quite some time. And so what typically was happening was being dumped further out into the Gulf or the ocean. So it had time to, water down, no pun intended. But, the more water you put something in, the less concentrated the pollutants will be. Well, they don't want to do that anymore. They're saying we're having a water problem. We need to make sure that water is in our aquifer. Totally ignore the fact that they give free passes to bottling water, 1.152 million gallons a day, Jenny Springs, to industrial uses, thank you, Big Sugar, and agriculture, to pretty much anything, and even to power generation, nuclear power plants and things like that. So water's being pulled out. That is owned by our Floridians. So less concentration, meaning more polluted. And then now they want to take, albeit treated, but still polluted water and throw it into the aquifer. So that then we don't know really what the impact of that's going to be. I mean, it could potentially be safe, but we don't know. And so before we start messing with our aquifer and potentially putting contaminants in there that will be there forever and take away the source of water for over 90% of Floridians, these things need to be thought through. And what the state has said this legislative session, I'll wrap up here on the environment and on many other things, but on these environmental bills, is we know better than you. We're not willing to do anything, though. And if you try to do something, we're going to stop you from doing it, which means we have our hands tied. Our toolboxes have been emptied. Cities are at the whim of a state that does not feel we are in an emergency, and they do not care about the people who are the most impacted by this, which are our most vulnerable citizens, and just are and try to continue to greenwash themselves continually over and over again. Do not be fooled. These bills are not good on any level, no matter how much they might try to make you think they are. I'll pass that on. Go.
Thanks, y'all. I think that's all of the bills that we're gonna dive into right now, unless folks have questions. So again, for those at home, please feel free to leave any comments you have. We can see your comments, and if you ask any questions, we can address them. So now we're just gonna talk about, like, we're all on this panel together because we all we're working on legislative session during session. So wondering if we can reflect together on what did we learn? What do we want to leave people with? What are we taking from this? How can we, move forward together as a progressive movement? What do we need to do to avoid this kind of just erosion of so many of our rights and access to health and labor rights and all these things? What do we need to do? What do we take from this? And if someone wants to start us off, please feel free. But also this can be more of a discussion and a back and forth and a dialogue. It doesn't have to be a question and answer for panelists. But yeah, wondering if someone wants to sort of reflect, what do you want to leave people with? I can start. I did this. So Republicans have a majority right now in the House and the Senate. So we have 120 House representatives in Florida and 78 of those 120 are Republicans, and 42 are Democrats. And we have 40 senators, and 24 of those are Republicans, and 16 are Democrats, and we have a Republican governor. And it is so much harder to try and flip anyone. It's hard to flip anyone. Like, people vote on party lines. You know, we see over and over, less and less across the country and in Florida, do people ever flip? So, like, you can predict for the most part how people will flip. And even if you organize really, really hard around an issue, like, if, you know, the deck is stacked against you. And so I like to organize around issues. It's much less fun to me to organize around a politician who's like flawed and not aligned with me on everything and not as progressive as I need them to be. But during the last election cycle, a Dream Defender AG told me, we don't vote for our heroes, we vote for our opponents. Like, you're picking your battle partner when you vote, because especially if you're in a progressive movement, like, you're going to be pushing your legislators on things. And so even when we're not like super excited about a candidate, like, I really, really, it was driven home for me this session, as opposed to, you know, even other sessions I've worked at, like, we have to get better people in office, because once we get to the legislative session point where we have these bills, it's a lot harder to get a legislator to vote against their party. So I came out of this a lot more compelled than I felt before to really throw down when it comes time for election season. And like, if you ever, you know, we all have like a progressive who's like a little small town, probably not going to win, running. We know them. We know who they are. We have them on Facebook, you know. And if you ever like go to their canvas, there's like one volunteer, and it's just like very sad. And I'm like, yeah, okay, we got to like do better than that. Like, we really have to like throw down for people who are aligned with us politically, even if they're not perfectly aligned with us. And just not be in a position where you're like begging a Republican to please flip, like, please vote against your party, please, we need you. It's gross to do that, and it doesn't work most of the time. And you know, we're seeing like money went out a lot. So that's one of the things that kept coming up for me when I was trying to flip Republicans on the governor's legislative priority. And, you know, they're basically like, no, we're not going to do that. Like, even people who don't believe in that, you know, I mean, even like, you know, Brooke, maybe you can comment on this more, but like, I feel like a lot of Republicans in Florida are like environmentalists, you know, like, there's kind of a conscious understanding, and like, that doesn't matter, like, that we as citizens are aligned on that for the most part, because like, we have politicians who will be bought by oil and gas. So yeah, that's coming up for me a lot, is like, all right, I'm about to throw down harder than I ever have before during like get out the vote and stuff, because even though it's not usually my wheelhouse, like, we have to do the work then for this to not happen again. Like, the fact that we haven't passed an anti-LGBT piece of legislation like this. Like, we don't do that in Florida. And like, you know, we got out organized then during election season. So now, like, this to me feels like this is like the consequence of that.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say, hey, Michelle, we have Representative Michelle Raynor commenting on our page. Woohoo!
This politician.
Yes, amazing, amazing politician. And she says, I long for the day our candidates can be our heroes. Same. I just want to agree wholeheartedly with Diana on the fact that we really need to invest our time into electoral work. I know it's not for everyone. I love electoral work. It is my favorite thing to do, believe it or not. I came up doing electoral work starting in 2008. So that's where my wheelhouse is. And it's just become so important, because the reality is we're not able to make progress when we just don't have the numbers. And so what's really lacking is like the right people in the right place to be able to affect the change that we as progressives want to see.
Yeah. million times over. You know, funny enough, right as Michelle popped on, I was thinking about a conversation that I had with her a couple weeks ago when we were trying to beat these bills. And I said to her, Michelle, what can we do? Like, be honest with me, be blunt with me. What can we really do? And she said, send me better coworkers. And honestly, given the dedication and the time that she has put in, and the time that people like Ana Escamani have put in, Carlos Guillermo Smith, we have our warriors and they need reinforcement. We can't expect them to move mountains without a movement. And we have a movement. And we need them voting.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that too. Our elections are also a time where we get to set agendas. You know, the platform, when candidates are running for office, that's when we're able to get out there and ask them the tough questions of where they stand on different issues, to lock them into campaign promises, so that we can then hold them accountable when they are in office. It does help, of course, if we start identifying some really strong candidates who don't need so much pushing. But for excellent candidates who are running, I mean, this is a time, don't just wait until session to let them know, you know, what we're feeling, but instead, we're right off session. This is a great time to make a checklist of what we'd like to see next year and the year after that and the year after that, and to start making sure that that's how we're, that's the message we are communicating to our elected officials who are awesome. And that's the message that we are communicating to those who are interested in running to represent our ideas. A lot of what happens during the legislative session partially is misinformation, because the rhetoric hasn't been out there, so that our elected are more susceptible to the misinformation, like things like Tampa was trying to ban gas stations, which was a complete and total lie, that somehow managed to keep a news front and discussions in legislative committees. But also identifying the candidates and who they are being backed by. Diana touched on the issue of if they're being paid by these guys, if that's who the lobbyist money that's coming their way is, then they're more likely to vote that way. We had several candidates, or not candidates, several elected officials who said they were going to vote one way, and then we found out about lobbying forces getting to them and they voted another way. You know, I know that we can't all handle campaign finance reform together on this call right now, but that's something also to keep in mind too, is look at where the money is coming from. If you want to know the things that are happening in this world, you follow the money train, and it makes the most sense. Us on this call, the four of us, are not the high-paid, George Soros-backed liberals that the false narrative has been put out there about. We are the ones who are sane and are working for a better future, who care. We're doing this because we care. And there has been a major gaslighting campaign going on by those who are in charge in the state capitol, acting like we're a bunch of crazy liberals who are trying to pass these just out there policies, when in actuality, not adopting common sense policies like unemployment benefits, like healthcare, like fighting COVID. That's where there's an actual disconnect between who's the extremist at the end of the day. Are the extremists those of us who are fighting for policies that are common sense to make life better for Floridians? Or are the extremists the ones who are buying in to special interests and passing policies that are only harming us moving into the future? So yeah, definitely on board with all this talk about the electoral work, but I think it goes even deeper than that. We need to be changing the narrative. We need to be in control of the narrative, and can't allow this gaslighting to going on that's been happening to the loud majority who has somehow been silenced through all of this.
Well, you know, there's many lanes on the road to justice, and we need more people filling all those lanes.
Yeah, I love that, Brooke. Sometimes I think about how like the right has made the word anti-fascist like a bad word. And I'm just like, I don't even like, I feel like, okay, we really have to like organize. You know, there's like a very well understood statement in politics that like there's two kinds of power, organized people and organized money. And like the progressive movement, we do not have organized money. Like, and we are nowhere near having organized money. That cannot be the way that we're trying to take power. Like, we have to have organized people. Like, that is our path to success. So I really, 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 it only becomes more apparent to me how important it is to like join an organization, like get in with a group of people who are organized and strategic and like doing real work together. You know, like you can go from the level of being the person who like fills out the petition to like being in the room with the people making the petition. Like we all that's where we all start, like, you know, as a person who signs the petition, and we always cross sign the petitions. I'm not making environmental justice petitions, I'm signing all of them though. But like get, you know, join an organization, like join a group of organized people who are talking to politicians and who are like running strategic campaigns and like know how to do media and press and like elevate your voice and like, you know, triple your impact kind of thing. So yeah, just like plug into any of these organizations are great, you know, like For Our Future is doing so much. If you like get on their email list, especially, like you will be so informed. It's amazing. Food and Water Watch and Tampa Bay Climate Alliance are doing really good work that is like making a serious impact in like the lives of residents of Hillsborough County, like in a material way. And they're a great group of people. Like I'm on those calls. I don't know very much about environmental justice. That's not my lane, but like they're great people, and like being plugged into that is really, really powerful. And Tampa Bay for Change has been a longstanding way to find out all of the amazing and horrible things happening. It's just like this great information hub. So like join an organization. I highly recommend Dream Defenders. But you know, whatever it is you're passionate about, if it's police and prison abolition, if it's environmental justice, if it's electoral organizing, labor rights, like get plugged in to an organization where you are going to meetings and like helping use your gifts and talents, which the progressive movement needs, to like fight for a healthier, safer, more loving and just world. Do we have anything else we want to join the what?
Join them all at once. Why not? We're all here hanging out anyways. You might as well join all of our organizations. Come hang out with us. Come to our events and then the people clearly running the show and talk to them. Find out when we're going to have more events. Come to those events. Just keep hanging out with us. We're fun.
And we're honest. If you can't tell, all of us are pretty straightforward about what's going on. So talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
okay.
a perfect.
I will maybe let people.
Oh, what were you gonna say, Diana?
I was just going to give everyone a chance to like plug the best way to connect with you or your organization, because I realized we didn't get everyone's information on the slides. So for the Tampa Squad of Dream Defenders, we have a Facebook and Instagram and a Twitter. We're best at Facebook, but we try really hard on the others and we're getting better. So highly recommend following us on Facebook at Tampa Squad, and our Instagram and Twitter as well. If you search Tampa Dream Defenders, we'll get you on there. And we're starting campaign school soon. So like Dream Defenders' big summer project is like, we're training people how to be organizers and like how to run strategic campaigns and identify targets and create impactful messaging and do creative tactics and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, send us a message and we can get you the link to that. Dream Defenders is, I guess we all introduced a little bit, but I'm just gonna give us all an opportunity to plug organizations again, because lots more people have joined since we started in the very beginning. Dream Defenders is a youth-led organization, majority Black and Brown youth, who are fighting to build a world that does not need police and prisons. So we are like abolitionists who are trying to envision a world of public safety that is like community members supporting each other. And like, we know that as we fight poverty and things like that and systemic racism, we create a world that doesn't need the state to like destroy families, to keep each other safe. We know that we keep each other safe. So, you know, we're working like to like dismantle some of those like oppressive forces, and also to like build sustainable community models that like support our own people and keep us safe. So, and we're a chapter-based organization, and I'm the lead organizer for Tampa. And we have the lovely Bernice as well, who is doing so much labor and has been for a long time. So yeah, we're a great group to plug in with. And I love us, and you should definitely follow us on Facebook. And I will let Bernice, you can plug next.
So as everyone's talking about like how important it is, especially to get involved for the elections, like for a future, elections are our lane, definitely. So if you're interested in learning, like, what does it look like to be involved in a campaign or to be involved in an election, let's stay connected. You can reach out to us and join our Facebook group. And we are always posting different opportunities to get involved, like phone banking and community canvassing. So really, really excited to stay engaged with y'all and looking forward to meeting you. I will pick on Brooke next.
Okay, thanks. I was trying to look for my link for a sign-up form. But the best way you can get involved, if you want something to do now, I'm going to put my phone number and my email in the chat. Those go directly to me. Those are the best way. If you're like, I'm on fire to start fighting for the environment and to start fighting for EJ communities, that's environmental justice communities, I'm going to have you pop me a call. The text is great, phone call, or an email. And then I also did put in the chat our Facebook page, which is the www.facebook.com/FWW Florida. So you can follow us there. And then also I send out, if you're more of a text person, and I'll put all this in the chat, you can text the word Florida, Florida, to 69866, and I will keep you abreast of everything going on. And I will pass it to Sam.
Okay, close out strong. If you visit our Facebook page, you can follow all of that we have coming. We just launched about 2 or 3 months ago, so lots to do. We have our website coming up soon where we're going to be promoting primarily informational media. We're talking about everything from short video explainers on bills going on throughout Florida to very excited to announce the first municipal vote tracker that is going to cover every single city council in Florida, all their votes by category. We're going to bring down a lot of walls and make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on. Beyond that, right now, we're working on a couple community initiatives with Black Lives Matter Tampa in conjunction, things like brake light clinics, things like further protests. We just co-led a protest last week in Tampa, the largest in Florida in at least a year, over 300 people, even with the fear of HB1, still turning out, still peaceful, still safe. And on the electoral side of things, we are very happy to have just endorsed Clifford Hobbs. He's running for city council in St. Pete. You can check out his page or you can follow us. We're going to be actively trying to stunt for him and get him in there. Very fresh voice, and definitely, I think, embodies a lot of the values and the concerns that we've been talking about all night. A lot of exciting stuff. Come change with us.
Thanks, y'all. Well, that was a very productive hour that we had together. For those watching, definitely remember to go back through those comments. Lots of us have posted some really great resources and some really quick actions and ways to get plugged in. So be sure to check out those Facebook comments. And thank you to everyone who joined and who sat with us tonight while we delivered some frustrating news and celebrated together and vented together. And, you know, our hope is that we take all of this information and all of this knowledge that many of us have learned through the legislative session, because it's always a learning process, and that we can use that to organize better in the future, and to really manifest the vision that we have for a progressive Florida that really works for all of us and takes care of all of its people. So thanks to everyone who's watching, and we hope you'll have a great night.
Bye.